Billionaire threw out Waitress for dancing with his son. 1 minute later, he gave her his card. What happens when a waitress dares to dance with a boy in leg braces at the city's most elite restaurant? The billionaire ordered her fired. What he did 1 minute later left the entire room speechless. Evening at Kingsley's was like attending a grand opera staged for wealthy snobs, except instead of Oreos, you got the clatter of forks on china and plastic conversations about hedge funds and quarterly returns. Everyone there wasn't eating so much as showcasing who could spend the most, who was sleeping with whom, and who was going to ignore the printed menu in a favor of something the chef deemed special. The chandeliers sparkled overhead like frozen fireworks, and every table looked like a runway for designer handbags and tailored suits. It was a gilded stage for carefully curated lives, and the price of admission went far beyond what was listed on the bill. Amid all that ornate charade walked Diana Johnson, the kind of woman whose presence didn't demand attention, but whose absence would be deeply felt. For 5 years, she maneuvered through that space with the precision of a grandmaster in a chess match, where losing meant getting a $1 tip from the kind of woman who had a brand name tattooed on her credit card. She was the only black waitress in a place where even water on the menu was sold to guests translated as alpine stillness infused with lavender essence. Every step she took, every tray she balanced, every forced smile she offered was a lesson in dignity and discipline, especially when elbows of entitlement hunted her heels like predators. It was in that hot, polished sanctuary of privilege that Richard Montgomery entered with the confidence of a man who believed his surname entitled him to any room, any conversation, any outcome. His name was etched on banks, investment wings, and probably on some island resort no one outside his inner circle had ever visited. He carried the world's demands in his pocket. On the edge of his phone was the voice of the board, and beside him walked his 10-year-old son, Lucas, locked in silence and orthopedic braces. Lucas moved through the world like a sigh, present yet withdrawn, his head held steady, as if protecting himself from some unspoken fragility. Diana spotted the boy the moment they entered, because she had always had eyes for deeper stories, the ones others overlooked. In his gaze, she recognized the hardened, tired spark of children who have been told they need special accommodations or suffer from limited capabilities, but who never get asked, "Do you just want a moment to be yourself?" He sat quietly, body braced against judgment, waiting in a room full of people who felt entitled to everything except real connection. Then something happened. Something no waiter, no billionaire, no fancy designer of Kingsley's $10,000 chairs could have predicted. Lucas stood up. He rose not because of muscle or force, but because something inside him had flicked a switch. Something as old as need, as strong as defiance. Something Diana recognized in herself long ago. The braces on his legs made a soft metallic sound that hung in the air like a question, and he walked slowly toward her, raising his hand, offering the universal invitation of dance. "May I dance with you?" Every head in the dining room froze like statues caught mid-sentence. Cutlery stilled, silverware paused. Someone dropped a wine glass so carefully that the stem snapped, shattering into shards that reflected the chandelier's glare. An iPhone camera flickered to life. But above it all came the crisp, entitled voice. "Sir, instruct your son to sit. This is a restaurant, not a dance floor," barked Manager Thornton, a relic of corporate control whose face turned crimson as if the sight of a child dancing was a threat to property values. "Our staff is not here for childish antics." Richard turned sharply, that practiced executive glare in full force, one that had once fired 3 employees in under 60 seconds. He looked at Diana as though she were a loose screw in the operation and stared at Lucas as if the kid was a system error. "Sit down, Lucas," he whispered, flat, like he was enacting a sentencing without jury or appeal. Diana didn't flinch, not an inch, not a flicker, but her eyes sharpened, alert, unyielding, like a soldier who understood there was a battle coming. The entire restaurant exhaled, some in shock, some in anger, all in curiosity. "Mr. Thornton," Diana said, voice measured but firm, as she reached behind and elegantly removed her apron, laying it on the tray with undramatic deliberation. "My shift has ended." The room held its breath as she placed the apron onto the tray. No clatter, no apology, just a quiet act that spoke louder than applause. And then she stepped toward Lucas and took his small hand in hers. "Apron's not easy to dance in," she said, offering him a gentle, confident smile. They started walking, together. Not waltz, not salsa, not tango, nothing choreographed or practiced. It was a syncopated dance of simple connection, Lucas leading, Diana following, each step a negotiation between fear and possibility. Her eyes held whole histories in them, and his braces rattled an anthem of resistance. Above them, the chandeliers dimmed in comparison to the bright flame of that moment. The room remained frozen. No one stepped forward. Even Thornton recoiled as if the air around Diana had turned electric. One woman nearby whispered, "She's fired by tomorrow." The words were soft, but the condemnation was loud. Phones continued recording. Witnesses paused, chewing lobster or sipping champagne. They watched something born before their eyes. But then something changed across the room. Richard Montgomery, rooted to the spot like a stake in soft ground, remembered something. His late wife, Elizabeth, dancing with Lucas in their kitchen. "It's never about perfection," she told him once, voice soft with memories of scraped knees and hopeful stumbles. "It's about being there when he takes that step." 3 steps. That's all they made. 3 honest, human steps. Lucas stopped. Diana gently released his hand. "Thank you for asking me," she whispered, voice soft in the charged hush. "It's an honor." She began to turn away. And then a voice, not the CEO voice, not the boardroom voice, but a voice with texture, as though he suddenly remembered what words felt like when you truly mean them. "Wait." Diana stood still. So did Lucas. The restaurant held its breath. "What's your name?" he asked her, tone halfway between business curiosity and human need. "Diana Johnson, sir." Richard dug into his suit pocket and produced not a branded business card, but something personal, a card he'd never given out unless he believed someone could change something. "Be in my office tomorrow, 10 a.m. The hush broke like a wave. The room exhaled. Diana's hand trembled. Her face stayed. Stone. A fortress. She nodded and left, her chest humming with every heartbeat like a war drum. Lucas turned to his father, face calm except for the tremor in his lips. "Papa, why did you do that?" His voice landed like a bomb. No anger, only hurt. And that hurt echoed through the silent crowd, more than any scandal or confrontation could have. Then Diana stepped out of Kingsley's, and in her chest something happened. It wasn't fear, but a different kind of fire. Deep, warm, ancestral anger. A flame carried down through generations, from a great-grandmother who scrubbed floors to a mother who died in a hospital shift. A legacy of refusal that said, "You will not break me." She didn't know what tomorrow held, but she knew this. Tonight, she had done what she had always been meant to do. She had danced, even when the room told her not to. When Diana stepped onto the cold, polished marble floor of Montgomery Tower's lobby, she felt that tug in her gut again. Not from fear, not exactly, but from that deep, bone-deep awareness that you're standing in a place never designed for you. That feeling of being inside a building where the doors open easily, but not for people like you. Especially not for people like you. The lobby was grand in the way only corporate ambition could afford. Massive glass walls that stared out over the city like smug eyes, towering marble columns that made you feel small, no matter how straight your back stood, and potted plants so curated they seemed to be sponsored by luxury brands instead of water. Everyone there moved fast. Every suit was ironed into submission. Every face was white, determined, and busy. And all of them, every single one, gave her that same sideways glance, that microscopic pause in stride, that "what department is she delivering to?" look, as if she'd taken a wrong turn somewhere near the loading dock. The security guard didn't even lift a finger toward the intercom the first time she spoke, or the second. It wasn't until her third attempt, when her voice had edged just a little sharper, that he gave a slow, reluctant glance up from whatever form he was staring at. "Diana Johnson, here for Mr. Montgomery. 10 o'clock, by invitation." He furrowed his brow like her name was a foreign object, something he didn't quite know how to process. Johnson and Montgomery in the same sentence? That combination must have short-circuited something. "One moment," he said, with the kind of deliberate slowness that people like him used when they wanted you to know you didn't belong. One moment was long enough for the old memories to sneak up, like the interview where she was told, "We have a very homogeneous team here. You understand?" Or the landlord who suddenly changed his mind after meeting her in person. By the time the guard finally spoke again, a slick earpiece in his right ear blinking like a lie detector, the sweat had already gathered at her temples. "She's expecting you. 18th floor. Miss Winters." He said it like he was granting access to heaven, not a corporate office. The elevator was so quiet it made her heartbeat feel like a marching band. She clutched her bag tighter, an old canvas tote with frayed straps and a stubborn zipper. It had survived 3 apartments, 1 roach infestation, And that flooded basement in Brooklyn. That bag didn't belong here, just like she didn't. But Diana held her head high, because her mother had taught her, if they're going to stare, let them stare at a woman who stands tall. The elevator doors opened to a corridor of chrome and glass, so polished it looked like the future, if the future were allergic to joy. Miss Winters was waiting. A woman who looked like her personality had long ago been uploaded into an Excel spreadsheet. High heels that could stab, cheekbones sharp enough to slice toast, and an expression that said she charged by the minute. "Follow me," she said without offering a smile. "Mr. Montgomery's on a call. He'll be with you shortly." They walked and kept walking. The corridor seemed longer than logic allowed. Along the way, Diana felt the glances. Some open, some discreet, none warm. A black woman walking through the executive wing of Montgomery Global was like a jazz riff in a Mozart recital, unexpected, suspicious, and possibly offensive. "You got fired?" Miss Winters asked suddenly, stopping just before the reception area. Diana turned her head slowly, evenly. Not confrontational, but not meek either. "Not yet." Winters said, arching a brow like punctuation. "I just meant people like you don't usually stick around long, especially after public scenes." Diana offered a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "People like me? Those who forget their place." "Oh, I'm sorry," Diana said, eyes still calm. "Maybe you can remind me where that is." Before Winters could respond, her phone rang. She picked it up like it had just saved her life. "You may go in now." The office was massive, bigger than every apartment Diana had lived in since college. Combined, floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the far wall, looking out over the skyline like a silent flex. There were no family photos, no clutter, just steel, glass, and concrete, the kind of place where people didn't work. They manipulated economies. Richard Montgomery stood at the window, arms crossed, back rigid like a man who had spent years perfecting how to look powerful from behind. "Miss Johnson," he said without turning. "Mr. Montgomery." When he finally turned around, everything about him was curated. His suit, his tie, even the spacing of his cufflinks. But his eyes betrayed something else. A flicker of uncertainty, like he was used to having answers. And now he wasn't sure which page of the script they were on. "Please," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Have a seat." There was a pause. The kind of pause that doesn't just fill the air. It tests it. The kind designed to make you squirm, or spill something, or overcompensate. Diana didn't move, not at first. Then calmly, with purpose, she sat down, back straight, eyes forward. "Tell me about yourself," he said, lowering himself into a leather chair that looked more throne than furniture. "Education, experience, bachelor's in child psychology, New York University, partial master's in special education, dropped out to help my sister raise her kids, worked service jobs, tutored where I could, co-founded a dance program for children with disabilities. Freedom steps?" He nodded, lips pressed together like punctuation marks, then pulled out a folder. It was thick, contained printouts, photos, maybe even surveillance. Of course it did. "Freedom Steps is closing," he said flatly. "Correct. Why?" "Because donors like plaques and headlines, not children learning how to stand on their own." He didn't argue, didn't flinch, just nodded again, slower this time. "I didn't invite you here to embarrass you," he finally said. "I invited you because for the first time in 2 years, my son took a step by himself, and he wanted to take another." He pulled out a fresh document, printed on thick, creamy paper with the kind of font that costs money just to license. A contract. "I want you to work with him. Not as a nurse, not as a therapist, as a partner in his recovery. We'll provide everything. Space, resources, compensation." Diana looked at the paper, then at him. "Why me?" she asked. "Why not your doctors? Your team?" "Because you didn't tell him how to walk. You followed him. Because he trusted you." She didn't touch the contract. "What happens if I say no?" He paused, then looked down for a second before answering. "Then I'll know I lost something important, and I'll have to live with that." He turned back toward the window, the skyline reflected in the glass. Diana stood. "You do understand," she said carefully. "I'm not here asking for a favor, and I'm not offering one." When she stepped back into the hallway, Miss Winters was still seated at her desk, eyes cool and lips already curled into something dismissive. "Don't expect him to remember you a week from now," she said, voice dipped in frost. Diana smiled. "Then you're lucky," she said. "You'll forget me much sooner." And she walked toward the elevator, tote bag swinging by her side, head held even higher than before. Because there are places that were never meant for people like her. But sometimes people like her walk in anyway and change the rules just by standing there. Diana didn't move into the Montgomery estate right away. Not because she was scared. Diana Johnson had walked through tougher neighborhoods than this gated palace. No, she waited because she understood something white wealth never seemed to grasp. When rich folks start tossing money like confetti, you'd best read the fine print. That fine print, more often than not, becomes the blade you never saw coming. The contract sat untouched in her bag for days. Crisp paper, embossed ink, promises dressed up as opportunities. She didn't sign, not yet. Not until she knew who really needed help in that house. The boy with braces or the man who built the fortress around them both. Richard didn't argue, didn't flinch, just looked at her like he was seeing, for the first time, a woman who couldn't be bought, even by someone whose last name paid for libraries and launched IPOs. The estate was beautiful, no doubt, but it was cold, not temperature cold. Expensive houses have heating systems better than most hospitals. It was the kind of cold that comes from absence, from rooms too perfect to be lived in, from art hung without memory, from couches arranged for symmetry, not comfort. This wasn't a home, it was a portfolio. Every emotion filtered, every smile rehearsed, every corner under the watch of discreet cameras and invisible expectations. Lucas, the same quiet boy in metal braces and miles of silence, barely acknowledged her at first. He ate alone. He had a speech therapist. He stared out of windows like the world outside was a painting everyone else got to walk into. Diana didn't press. She didn't hover or plead. She simply existed. Every morning she took her seat on the veranda with a book. No words of invitation, no tricks, just reading. Sometimes she read aloud, just enough for Lucas to hear if he wanted to, just enough for her presence to say, "I'm here if you need me." On the third day, he stepped outside, just stood there near the threshold. On the fourth, he sat on the porch steps, silent but closer. On the fifth, he asked, softly, like the question had waited years to be spoken, "Do you always read when you're bored?" She turned the page, then looked at him. "I read when someone near me might need a story more than I do." He paused. "Do you know stories where the heroes mess up?" "Child," she said with the faintest smile, "those are the only kind I know." On the eighth day, he moved closer. The metal braces squeaked, and his body tensed like every step was a gamble. His eyes held that terrifying mix, fear of falling and hope of flying. "Can we try again?" he whispered, barely audible, as if he was bracing for laughter or rejection or both. Diana stood, no grin, no patronizing nod, just calm, even seriousness. She looked him square in the eye. "Lead the way." Lucas moved. His brace clipped a tile, nearly took him down, but she didn't reach for him. She stepped back, let him find his balance, matched his pace, his rhythm, his direction, no corrections, just presence. By the fifth step, he laughed, a real laugh, childlike, messy, honest, the sound of joy pushing through 2 years of silence, and from a distant window, Richard watched, frozen in place, like he'd seen a ghost, or maybe, for the first time, truly seen his son. That evening, Diana walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. Mrs. Hoffman, the housekeeper, normally quiet, always formal, caught her eye. Something was different in her expression. "Thank you," she said softly. "For him." But in a house like this, gratitude never came alone. It always rode in tandem with warning. 2 days later, a new character entered the scene. Dr. Moss, the personal therapist, white as skim milk, tailored suit from Xenia, and the kind of eyes that scan people the way banks scan for risk, measuring value, not humanity. He was polite, polished, and utterly soulless. "I've reviewed the footage," he said over lunch. "Your approach is concerning." "Concerning?" Diana laid her fork down carefully. "He walks, he laughs. That's called progress. Unstructured, unsupervised, unregulated. You're giving the patient illusions of recovery without a controlled methodology. That creates emotional vulnerability, risk of regression, and potential psychological trauma." "Ah," Diana said, eyes narrowing. "So you'd rather he sit in silence, staring at walls?" "I'd rather trained specialists oversee his development." She stood, tall, still. "Have you, at any point in the last 2 years, made him laugh?" Silence. Just that same blank gaze filing her into a mental folder labeled disruptive. The next morning, Diana found a new contract on her nightstand. Same terms, except now with a 2-week time limit. Taped to it, a note in perfect script. "Thank you and good luck." She stared at it, long and hard, then glanced at the suitcase in the corner. She began to pack, not from fear, from clarity. This was a game, And when the rules start changing mid-play, you don't beg. You bow out with grace. Down the hallway she went, suitcase rolling, tote slung across one shoulder. Contract in the trash. Simple. Then, crash. Lucas came barreling out of his room. No crutches, just braces. He stumbled, fell, got up, kept going, toward her. "Don't leave!" he yelled, voice cracking. "Please, not you!" She froze. The suitcase hit the floor with a dull thud. He reached her, arms flung tight around her waist, shaking like a soaked puppy, clinging like she was his anchor to the earth. "I don't want someone else. I don't want those doctors. I don't want to be a patient again. I just want to be me. With you." The mansion's doors swung open. Richard stood there, silent, still, watching as if seeing his child alive for the very first time. "Diana," his voice broke. You wanted me gone," she said quietly. "Well done." Number I wanted understanding. Now I have it. He stepped forward. This time no clipboard, no scripts, just a sheet of paper, a different contract. But this wasn't a job offer, it was a manifesto. "I'm not asking you to work for us anymore. I'm asking you to lead something, a program, fully funded, with staff, for kids like Lucas, for people like you." She didn't take the paper. "Why should I believe you?" Because today he made a choice. He stepped forward, on his own, because for the first time, he said what he wanted, and what he wanted was you. That night, after the chaos faded and the silence returned, Diana sat out on the veranda. No papers in hand, just a drawing. Lucas had made it. Crayon lines and crooked smiles, a stick figure of her, a stick figure of him, dancing. Above it, "Thank you for following me." And that's when she knew. Some dances aren't about the music. They're about choice. The morning didn't greet Diana with sunlight or coffee. No, it greeted her with something else. Something rare, something sacred. The sound of footsteps. Uneven, tentative, like the house itself was holding its breath. She opened her door slowly, eyes still adjusting. There he was, Lucas. No crutches, just braces, just will. He walked, if you could call it walking, through the hallway like a whisper made of bone and metal. Each step a sentence, each pause a paragraph. His face, calm, his eyes electric. "I want to practice," he said. That was all. But the way he said it, Lord, Diana felt it in her ribs, like someone had rung a bell inside her chest. Because it wasn't just a request, it was a declaration. "For tomorrow," he added, "the performance. For Dad." Diana didn't ask questions, didn't press. She just nodded once, because he didn't need permission. He needed belief. And so the day began. Not like some polished rehearsal with polished professionals and precision clocks. This was a battle, a storm. This was two bodies in motion, one old enough to carry the weight, one young enough to still believe it's possible. Step, pause, fall, stand, again, again, again. No complaints, no drama. Just clenched jaws and burning calves and a kind of grit that doesn't get taught. It gets forged. And through it all, Diana didn't lead. She supported. Sometimes she guided. Sometimes she just sat in silence. Her presence was an anchor. Invisible, but everything depended on it. Richard, nowhere to be seen. He stayed in his study all day, sitting behind his empire like a king in a crumbling tower. But he watched. Oh, he watched. Through security feeds, through cracked open doors, through the eyes of a man realizing power ain't worth a damn if your son doesn't know how to live. Then the evening came. Not just any evening, the evening. The great hall was lit like a stage, chandeliers like falling stars, fire crackling, crystal glasses chiming, the kind of setting where billionaires get baptized in champagne and investors flirt with numbers like they're lovers. Family friends were there, two well-dressed reporters, press badges peeking out like secrets, a senator, long retired, but still sharp enough to confuse everyone's names. And yes, investors, the real sharks, the ones who don't clap unless they're clapping for stock growth. Tonight wasn't just about Lucas. It was a presentation. Richard's new vision, a philanthropic initiative for children with disabilities, shiny, branded, and backed by serious money. They'd heard rumors, whispers, but tonight was the show. And then, before the speech, before the numbers, Lucas stepped forward. He wasn't pushed, he wasn't called, he chose. In his black suit, one size too big, and Converse sneakers because dress shoes didn't fit over the braces. He looked like a contradiction, like a question mark walking into a room full of exclamation points. The crowd silenced. Then he danced. Now listen, this wasn't ballet. This wasn't technique or flow or rhythm. It was raw. It was jagged. It was brave. It was everything that movement should be. Honest. He moved with struggle, with power, his arms slicing the air like declarations, his feet stumbling with purpose. This wasn't a performance. It was resurrection, and next to him, Diana. No spotlight, no microphone, no title, just her. She didn't dance, not really. She followed, mirrored, watched. Her eyes spoke louder than a symphony. I'm here. Keep going. You've got this. By the time he stopped, the room wasn't silent. It was stunned, not confused, just shifted, like everyone had been handed a new lens and forced to re-watch the last 10 years of their lives. Then, applause, scattered at first, tentative, then stronger, rising, a standing ovation. Even the senator clapped, though he clearly thought he was at a recital for his grandson. And Richard walked forward, slowly, not like a man who owned the building, like a man realizing the building had never been his to begin with. He cleared his throat. Tonight, I learned something. His voice cracked. This man, once named CEO of the year, now spoke like someone uncertain whether he had earned a single moment of it. I've spent years building things. Companies, capital, campaigns. But none of that matters if I can't hear the people closest to me. He turned to Diana. This woman didn't just help my son stand. She helped me move. Not on a spreadsheet, not in a boardroom, but in life. He held up a folder. Not another contract, a blueprint, a program, a school, a movement. He opened it, pages fluttering. It's called Steps Beyond. And she, Diana Johnson, will lead it, not as a figurehead, as a founder. This isn't charity. This is investment. In people, in possibility. Murmurs filled the room. The investors shifted, a few already calculating, a few genuinely listening. One woman teared up. And every center will bear her photo, Richard said. Not for vanity, but because we all need to see what resilience looks like. Diana stepped up, took the mic, waited, then spoke. I don't believe in fairy tales, she said. Never have. I didn't expect a billionaire to care about anything but making another billion. But sometimes, a miracle doesn't come wrapped in a glass slipper. Sometimes it walks in braces, with sweat on its brow. She paused. Let the words sink. I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to remind you that sometimes the ones doing the real work don't wear suits. They wear aprons. That night she shook hands with dozens of guests, some genuine, some opportunistic. One old man, white mustache and southern drawl, approached her gently. Miss Johnson, he asked, sincere confusion in his eyes. Tell me, how'd you do it? She smiled, a half smile, the kind that carried history. Dancing ain't about steps, she said. It's about choices. I just chose to stay close. And that was that. The next morning she woke not as a guest, not as an employee, but as a founder. On the desk by her bed sat a crayon drawing. Lucas had made it. 2 figures, one tall, one small, holding hands. In the background, a stage. Above them, a single word. Thanks for staying. 1 month later, the first Steps Beyond Center opened. Kids ran, stumbled, danced, laughed. Parents cried. One child spoke for the first time. One word, more. Richard was there. No entourage, no cameras, just a dad. Diana sat beside him. You still scared? She asked. He looked at her. Yes, he admitted. But now, I'm scared of being left behind. And when they stepped on stage for the ribbon cutting, Lucas took her hand again. Lead? He asked. She shook her head, eyes warm. Not today, sweetheart. You lead. And they walked. Not fast, not smooth, but forward. To a rhythm no one else could hear, except those who'd lived it.